I think what most people don't know is how close we are to a climate-driven economic collapse that comes when climate risk becomes uninsurable. So you can't get a property insurance policy on your home. There are plenty of Californians who are experiencing that. And then when you can't get property insurance on your home, you can't get a mortgage on it. You can't sell it to somebody who needs a mortgage. So unless you're selling it to a billionaire who can pay cash, you're screwed.
Welcome to Climate Crossroads San Diego. My name is Walt. Up front, I would like to apologize for resorting to the use of an episode title like Sleepwalking into Disaster. In the modern information media space, it's the cheapest and most common form of clickbait. However, I don't care if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's not commercialized. To me, this is all a public service. If you own a home, you are a real estate professional, or you are in the financial services industry, you need to understand what is coming. The cold open in this video is taken from the Gavin Newsom podcast as shown here. I have criticized our governor in the past for his policies on energy prices, and I expect to do so again. However, I applaud Governor Newsom for this podcast because he has put a spotlight on a global problem that will hit tens of thousands of people in San Diego. First, I will shift to another podcast to provide some global perspective. And then we will return to Senator Whitehouse's explanation on how this problem is already turning worse in America. If you are not a viewer of Science Communicators on YouTube, I have added a very brief bio on her background in the lower right of this screen. As I was planning my podcast to highlight Governor Newsom's discussion with Senator Whitehouse, this video popped into my feed and had to be included.
I recently read in The Guardian that climate change will destroy capitalism. Interesting twist, because a lot of climate activists seem to think that destroying capitalism is the way to go. So maybe they should now actually support climate change. I'm only half joking, and that's still 50% more serious than the US government. But let's have a look at what this is about. The Guardian article reports on a piece written by Günther Tallinger from the major insurance company Allianz. Tallinger warns that climate change makes home insurance increasingly costly and that eventually insurers can no longer offer coverage or people can no longer pay it. This, Tallinger says, is a bigger deal than it sounds because this is a systemic risk that threatens the very foundation of the financial sector. If insurance is no longer available, other financial services become unavailable too. A house that cannot be insured cannot be mortgaged. No bank will issue loans for uninsurable property. Credit markets freeze. This is a climate-induced credit crunch. This applies not only to housing but to infrastructure, transportation, agriculture and industry. The economic value of entire regions, coastal, arid, wildfire-prone, will begin to vanish from financial ledgers. Markets will reprice rapidly and brutally. This is what a climate-driven market failure looks like. He isn't the only one to worry. In January 2025, the Financial Stability Board warned that climate-related vulnerabilities in the financial system, when triggered by climate shocks, could threaten financial stability through various transmission channels and amplification mechanisms, and that if the climate shock is sufficiently material, these risk channels could affect the solvency of a wide variety of financial institutions, sectors and geographies in a highly correlated manner, leading leading to systemic risks. This isn't blind alarmism. These people really should know. After all, it's literally their job to quantify future risks, and those risks are about to explode. Insurances are the canary in the coal mine of climate change, and that mine is on fire underwater and no longer insurable. In the United States, the Senate's Budget Committee published a report on home insurance just in December. They found that between 2018 and 2023, the share of people who didn't renew their home insurance increased by more than 200% in Florida, Louisiana, and Hawaii, presumably because insurance became unaffordable or unavailable. The report warns that insurance is essential to obtaining a mortgage, so as insurances become less available, more and more affected properties will become unmortgageable. And as more and more properties become unmortgageable, property values in affected markets will decline as most buyers need a mortgage. Australia and New Zealand too are facing what experts are calling a home insurance crisis. The Australian Climate Council has warned that by 2030, about 1 in 25 homes will be uninsurable. The situation in Europe is slightly better insofar that we get neither hurricanes nor cyclones, just floods, droughts and heat waves. But the European Environment Agency says that the economic losses from these extreme weather events have increased by almost 3% a year from 2009 to 2023. Economists are warning of an insurance protection gap. That's the difference between insured and uninsured losses from climate-related catastrophes. The European Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority estimates this gap to be around 75%. This isn't just a gap, that's missing a floor. Those were a lot of numbers, but I think you'll get the picture. It doesn't matter whether people believe that climate change is real. It's causing real economic damage. Once the damage is done, someone has to fix it. The costs for that are getting so high that there isn't enough money in the private sector to finance it through insurance. Hence, insurance companies say governments need to pick up part of the bill, thus the talk about the failure of capitalism. So I'm afraid that no, this isn't alarmism. This is the reality that we live in. But hey, at least we're finally seeing the invisible hand of the market, waving a white flag.
Now let's hear what Senator Whitehouse has to say on the subject.
I think what most people don't know is how close we are to a climate-driven economic collapse that comes when climate risk becomes uninsurable. So you can't get a property insurance policy on your home. There are plenty of Californians who are experiencing that. And then when you can't get property insurance on your home, you can't get a mortgage on it. You can't sell it to somebody who needs a mortgage. So unless you're selling it to a billionaire who can pay cash, you're screwed. So no mortgage means your property values crash. And when your property values crash, if that happens to enough people, which it will, because this is driven by climate risk that touches millions and millions of people, you then get an economic wipeout like the 2008 mortgage meltdown caused across the country, harming people who had no problems with their mortgage. It was just the economic wipeout.
So someone listening may think that may be slightly hyperbolic. Then again, folks living on the coasts, folks living in the South, in places like Louisiana,
Yep.
Obviously, in Florida, not
Yep.
just in California, are feeling that reality. Obviously, the wildfires here in the western United States, the hurricanes in the southern part of the country. What's the national prism then to begin to address this issue? Obviously, we got to deal with some of the underlying issues of climate change, but in an adaptation policy, we often are talking about sea level rise. We're talking about other strategies to mitigate, but you're talking about a looming financial crisis,
Correct.
which raises the bar of concern.
Correct. Yeah. And Florida, I think, is first and worst. Florida has more liability from the fund it set up to backstop the insurers who go bust there, which is like a dozen already, because they're basically little pop-ups that aren't for real.
Right.
and the state steps in when they don't pay claims, and then the taxpayer has to pay. And they've got a separate state-backed insurance company that is trying to look like an insurance company and carrying all this liability
Right.
that probably they won't be able to make good on. Those two risks to Florida are bigger than the state's actual like sovereign debt. So there's a huge overhang over Florida, and it's going to do nothing but get worse. You've got property insurance rates that have tripled in a lot of places in Florida, and that are expected to triple again. That's really brutal. And when that happens, it starts cascading out through the economy. The International Financial Stability Board put out a global warning to banks. Look out for this. This is coming. Because, for instance, if all these properties' value go down because they're not mortgageable any longer, then their value goes down on the loan-to-value ratio of a bank. And now suddenly a bank doesn't look solvent any longer, and it's got its own problems. So these problems cascade out into the economy, and that's what we have to prepare people for. And I think, you asked a great question, just what do we do about it? Step one is to stop what is causing this, which is climate change, but behind that, the climate denial operation of the fossil fuel industry, which through disinformation and political corruption is just ruining our ability to deal with a problem whose solutions are actually pretty evident if we could get around the wiles and the mischief of the fossil fuel industry.
I appreciate the clarity on that. I mean, the climate crisis is nothing more than a fossil fuel crisis. It's the burning of oil and gas. And
then lying about it to the public at industrial scale.
And having the best scientists, having the best researchers in this space for decades and decades, and being able to see into the future and then knowingly lied about it. They weren't just in denial. They actually suppressed this information from the public for decades.
The scientists have known their stuff about climate this whole time. I mean, the scientist community can really take a bow for really excellent presentations and really excellent understanding and predictions. And that includes the ones paid by Exxon. They got it right 30 years ago.
And Exxon needs some of the greatest geologists. They hire some of the best and the brightest minds. Best can be broadly described, but for the job intended. So they're able to attract the talent because they're able to dig deep into their wallet to get that talent. But as a consequence, they're digging deeper into our wallets right now because
and unfortunately,
of the
they
socialized
can
costs.
spend similar talent in the disinformation, propagandizing, setting up phony front groups, the whole armada of disinformation effort that they run is also being done at a very, hate to say it, it's being done very professionally.
And so, Senator, you're one of the few folks. I mean, there's a handful of you, and I give due where it is deserved. There is a handful of U.S. senators that have the guts, because I think it takes guts to say what you just said, and the courage to be out front, to call balls and strikes, and to call out those that are responsible. Polluters should pay, but they're socializing the cost.
Econ 101.
Econ 101 on all of us. So the question is, why? Is it just simply because it's electorally ill-advised to be so candid? Is it because of the corruption that is sort of imbued in the system? It's the unwillingness to take the risk of to be more resolved in this space? Is it just what we've come to expect, and that is big money influencing, having outsized influence?
Boom. Big money having outsized influence. If you set up an enormous armada of phony front groups and you put Madison Avenue tested fake messaging through that, and you backstop it with literally billions of dollars in dark money into Congress, into the back pocket of Mitch McConnell so that he can, through super PACs, drop ads on Democrats. You put that whole machine together, and up against it, you have Democrats being like well-meaning and talking about polar bears. It's like totally not a fair fight. It's the Panzer tanks versus the Polish cavalry. You just don't have a chance. So we need to be much better about it. The good news is we don't have to build the apparatus of lies. All we have to do is build a much more adept and sharp apparatus to point out the lies.
I'm going to leave it right there, so each of you can ponder what this all means to you and your families. Except I will say one more thing. As Senator Whitehouse correctly reminds us, we have been here before. If you don't remember what happened in 2008 and the Great Recession, you might want to brush up on that mortgage and financial collapse. Thanks again for watching, and keep up the good fight.